You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Hristodoulou.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and today we're doing an off-season preview for the Denver Broncos, a team that just made a massive move for a new head coach, and we'll dive into that in a second. But we're going over things that I would like to see this Broncos team focus on as they roll through this year's offseason. So, my Broncos fans, make sure you comment down below. Let me know what you want to see out of your Denver Broncos this offseason. Moves, trades, things that you want to see them make, whatever it may be. I would love to hear from you all. But diving right into it, we'll begin with the priorities of the Denver Broncos, two that I have picked out here specifically. The first one being, and this is a pretty obvious one, and thankfully bringing in Sean Payton should really help this out, establishing an offensive system that plays to the strengths of Russell Wilson. There has been a lot of conversation as to what Russell Wilson wants from an offensive system at this stage in his career. A lot of people talking about how he wants to focus on being more of a pocket passer and relying less on his legs. And while that's fine, he's getting older and maybe he doesn't want to take those bumps and bruises that he was earlier in his career. I do still think, though, that when it comes to his strengths, a sound running game and also quick passing game is probably going to be something that really helps him out, because Russell Wilson really excels in the play action. And while, again, he doesn't want to be relying too much on his legs, I think he works really well when it comes to those play action passes, especially with a really strong running game like he had in Seattle for many, many years. So if you're Sean Payton, that is probably what you have to get into the mind of Russell Wilson, that yes, we'll let you be the passer that you want to be. And, you know, I really think that Russell Wilson has a shot at making it back to maybe not quite the level of his earlier days in his career, but I don't think he's as bad as last year. That would be just a steep cliff to have fallen off of from even just a few years prior. So I think that there's still some gas in the tank for Russell Wilson, but Sean Payton really needs to get into Russell's head that's like that, you know, while yes, we want you to be the pocket passer, the guy who can wheel and deal the football all over the field, we need to focus on opening things up for you and making your job easier so you can do that. And like I said, quick passes, a strong and you know, competitive running game, something that is going to open up those play actions for him to really help him be successful. This was the worst team in the league on third down last year because it was just a very bland and downright obvious type of offense, I guess you could say. So with that in mind, it's up to Sean Payton. He has got to get it into Russell Wilson's head. Listen, we want you to be the premier passer that you want to be, but we've got to focus on how we're going to make that happen and make it easiest for you. The second thing that and this is more of an expectation less than something I want to see happen here, is seeing how the Broncos improve this offensive line. This is definitely something that's going to need to be worked on and is something I expect to see changes around as well. The Broncos led the league in sacks allowed this season with 63, only one of two teams to have allowed 60-plus sacks, the Colts being the other at the exact 60 mark. With Calvin Anderson, Billy Turner, Tom Compton, Dalton Reisner, and Cameron Fleming, all potential free agents, I firmly expect to see some shifting around with what they do with the offensive line, potential signing of somebody during free agency, maybe going after some guys in the draft, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But the big focus here should be to work on that offensive line, because while a lot of people point out Russell Wilson as being the problem, that offensive line for Denver this year was not good and is something that really needs to be worked on. Now, moving on from the priorities and the big things I would like to see them focus on, we're going to focus on free agency here. Something that I would like to see them attack is finding guys for the defensive line. And while I would like to see somebody on the edge, there's also some really good guys on the interior that could also be helpful when it comes to improving the pressure you're bringing onto the quarterback and also bringing that quarterback down. Obviously, dealing with a big injury to Randy Gregory, who missed pretty much the majority of the season, I think he missed like 11 games altogether, is going to hurt the production of your team. But this is a team that was 23rd in sacks with only 36 last year when it comes to finishing those pressures and getting to the quarterback. Not necessarily the great. You're basically looking at like the bottom quarter of the league at that point. You want to prove to everyone that you're all in when it comes to Russell Wilson and bringing a Super Bowl with him as your quarterback in this defense here that's been really good the last few years. It's just their strong suit hasn't really been taking down the quarterback. I want to see you go after some proven guys. Robert Quinn, Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, David Onyemata. There's a lot of significant names that have a proven track record of collapsing pockets and getting to the quarterback that you could really look at and think are realistic guys to bring in. They're all older, yes, but you are kind of in win now mode anyways, so you don't need to necessarily look at guys that are maybe late to mid 20s or, staying away from those 30-plus-year-old guys. You could go after proven commodities, guys that maybe are closer to the back end of the career that you could get a deal on. But if there's one thing that I think is a quick fix, or not even necessarily a quick fix, but something that's easy to attain in this offseason for Denver, it's pass rush help. Now, could you get it from some of the guys on your team? Sure. There's Browning. Obviously, he was a solid piece going over there on the opposite side of where, excuse me, I'm blanking on a name here. Randy Gregory just said it a second ago. Obviously, he's a guy who could be successful opposite of Randy Gregory. And, again, a full season from Gregory will really kind of prove to you what you have if he is playing alongside him. But even if it's just quality depth, guys to add into the rotation, and it's not necessarily a guy you're going to start opposite of Gregory, I don't know necessarily what you're going to do there, but go after somebody that's going to help you out. And if it's not the edge, look at the interior. There's some really good guys on the interior that are, again, aging veterans you could probably get on a slightly cheaper deal than a guy that's closer to his prime. It might be a little bit more productive, but who knows? With some good talent around those aging veterans, it might improve their output, and you could get a really good value free agent somewhere along that D-line to help out this defense, because it's a really good group overall. The pass rush is just not quite where it needs to be in terms of finishing those plays. Yeah, you could create pressure and, make the quarterbacks uncomfortable, but you want to be bringing those QBs down and bringing that number up from 23rd in the league to something along the lines of even just in the top half to closer to that top 10 range should be something that the Broncos are definitely looking at in this year's free agency class with the amount of potential people that could be sitting out there for you to grab and bring in. Now, beyond free agency and into the NFL draft, you're not picking until picks number 68 and 69 in the third round. You have quite a while to wait before you're able to make any selections here. And I talked about earlier about how I would like to see the Denver Broncos, and I expect them to, work on the offensive line. Well, good news for them, a focus on the center and guard positions and maybe even the right tackle, depending on who you keep and who you let go. It really is going to be determined by the free agent retention of the Broncos. But there is some pretty quality depth and even potential starters, depending on how well they progress through training camp and the offseason workouts and in through the preseason, in rounds 3 through 5, where you could realistically go back-to-back O-linemen here, and it wouldn't be that bad of an idea. Now, are there other needs on the team? Sure. But like I said, the biggest and largest, I would say, glaring hole on this offense outside of just, the lack of production you got from maybe Russell Wilson this year has got to be the O-line and protecting Russell Wilson. So if you're looking at anything in the draft, especially in that third, fourth, fifth round range, look at some of those linemen. There's some really solid names, and I'll be diving more into that as I go through draft previews later on in the offseason. I have some guys specifically listed out that I would be kind of shocked to not see them go after for the Denver Broncos. So there will be some guys we'll talk about, but take a look at some of the guys that are going to be available or are projected to be within that third, fourth, fifth round. Some solid guys to add to the offensive line, and it helps you save some money because offensive line can get a little bit pricey depending on what you're going after in free agency. This would be a good way to address the issue, but also not break the bank because you don't necessarily have the most money in the world in terms of cap space. You're looking at $11.5 million or so, at least at this point. So a cheap, cost-effective way to help address some of the issues you've been dealing with on that O-line. Another thing that I wouldn't be opposed to them doing is maybe finding a safety somewhere in those later rounds to add some depth. I don't necessarily know if the Broncos plan to bring back Kareem Jackson or not. Obviously, not quite the spring chicken he has been the last few years. He's only getting older and older, and Father Time is undefeated. I wouldn't mind seeing them go after a quality guy somewhere within that third, fourth, fifth round range, maybe a little bit later as well. One guy that I have in mind from the Colts last year, they drafted a safety in the third round, and he ended up being a pretty quality and solid starter for them, someone who played a lot of snaps, someone that they could rely on. So you can find some of those quality guys that don't necessarily have to be the star, especially when you have Justin Simmons on the opposite side of the field. You can kind of get away with having maybe a younger guy that's playing alongside him because he can, direct him and show him the ropes, essentially, of playing that back-end position there on the defense. So a safety within those rounds as well, not necessarily something that I would be opposed to seeing Denver work on. But that's kind of how I look at the draft for the Broncos this year, for the free agent period, and just big important things that I want to see them focusing on going into this offseason. My Broncos fans, again, I would love to see what you all have to say about this as well. Shoot some comments down below. I'd love to hear you all and see what you think about this Broncos team and what they need to be working on this offseason. But that is it for me. I will catch you guys in the next offseason preview video. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.